Well, hey, everybody, and welcome to the Daily Bible Podcast presented by Saint Church. My name is Caleb, and our hope is to help you study the Word of God every single day. Every day, we are taking time to upload episodes onto Spotify, Apple, and YouTube, where we are taking time to read a chapter of the Bible, look at the context it was written in, and seeing what it has to say for us today. And so today, what we're going to be doing is continuing on in the book of Esther by reading Esther Chapter 8, seeing where the story is going to take us today. So with that being said, let's dive on in. Let's look at what it has. Esther chapter 8, starting in verse 1, it says this. That same day, King Xerxes gave Queen Esther the estate of Haman, the enemy of the Jews. And Mordecai came into the presence of the king, for Esther had told how he was related to her. The king took off his signet ring, which he had reclaimed from Haman, and presented it to Mordecai. And Esther appointed him over Haman's estate. Esther again pleaded with the king, falling at his feet and weeping. She begged him to put an end to the evil plan of Haman the Agagite, which he had devised against the Jews. Then the king extended the gold scepter to Esther, and she arose and stood before him. If it pleases the king, she said, and if he regards me with favor and thinks it the right thing to do, and if he is pleased with me, then let an order be written overruling the dispatches that Haman, son of Hammedatha the Agagite, devised and wrote to destroy the Jews in all the king's provinces. For how can I bear to see disaster fall on my people? How can I bear to see the destruction of my family? King Xerxes replied to Queen Esther and to Mordecai the Jew, because Haman attacked the Jews, I have given his estate to Esther, and they have impaled him on the pole he set up. Now write another decree in the king's name in behalf of the Jews, as seems best to you, and seal it with the king's signet ring. For no document written in the king's name and sealed with his ring can be revoked. At once the royal secretaries were summoned. On the 23rd day of the third month, the month of Sivan, they wrote out all Mordecai's orders to the Jews and to the satraps, governors, and nobles of the 127 provinces stretching from India to Cush. These orders were written in the script of each province, in the language of each people, and also to the Jews in their own script and language. Mordecai wrote in the name of King Xerxes, sealed the dispatches with the king's signet ring, and sent them by mounted couriers who rode fast horses especially bred for the king. The king's edict granted the Jews in every city the right to assemble and protect themselves, to destroy, kill, and annihilate the armed men of any nationality or province who might attack them and their women and children, and to plunder the property of their enemies. The day appointed for the Jews to do this in all the provinces of King Xerxes was the 13th day of the 12th month, the month of Adar. A copy of the text of the edict was to be issued as law in every province and made known to the people of every nationality, so that the Jews would be ready on that day to avenge themselves on their enemies. The couriers riding the royal horses went out, spurred on by the king's command, and the edict was issued in the citadel of Susa. When Mordecai left the king's presence, he was wearing royal garments of blue and white, a large crown of gold, and a purple robe of fine linen. And the city of Susa held a joyous celebration. For the Jews, it was a time of happiness and joy, gladness and honor. In every province and in every city to which the edict of the king came, there was joy and gladness among the Jews, with feasting and celebrating, and many people of other nationalities became Jews because fear of the Jews had seized them. And that is the close of Esther chapter 8. Now, really quick, there's a lot that just happened, so let's make sure we remember where we're at in the story. In the story of Esther, as we have seen it so far, we end up seeing that King Xerxes, he ended up having a new queen appointed when he had cast away his old queen, Queen Vashti. During this process, we end up seeing Queen Esther installed as the queen. Her uncle Mordecai is a Jewish man who was a father figure to her because he had adopted Esther. He told Esther to walk wisely, to not tell people her nationality, that she was a Jewish woman, as she was in the household of the king. Now, during this time, we end up seeing that a man named Haman, he ends up having great hatred for Mordecai and for all of the Jewish people. Because of his hatred, he is driven to the point that he goes to the king and he has an edict written and established that would allow the people of the land to attack and to kill the Jewish people on a given day in a given month. Now, within this, we end up seeing that Haman, his pride and his arrogance start to get the best of him. You see, during his edict being sent out in the name of King Xerxes, Mordecai hears of it and he goes to Esther and he asks her to plead for the sake of her people. And so ultimately she takes time, she prays and she fasts and she goes before the king. During this time when she goes before the king, it was a moment where if he had not received her, well, she would have been put to death. That was the custom, that was the time. Yet the king receives her. He says that she can come to his presence, that he can hear out what she has to say. Esther's very wise in the process. Listen to some past episodes to hear more about the process she went about, but she's very wise in the process. Haman continues to act evil and vilely, and ultimately Esther is able to make her plea that the people would be taken care of and that it would be recognized that Haman was the one who installed this persecution against the Jewish people. And so in this moment, what we're seeing happen is that Haman, he had a stake put up, a giant pole to have Mordecai killed on. And the king at the end of chapter 7, when he ends up being finally fed up with Haman, he ends up having it ordered that Haman be put on the very pole that he had prepared for Mordecai. Now then, what we end up seeing happen here is Esther, she was not just pleading for justice from a man who had walked in hatred. She was asking for justice for her people who are still in danger. And so Esther and Mordecai then, they go before the king and they say, King, we have to change some things. And so in this moment, the amazing thing that happens is King Xerxes, a man who is asked brashly, he is asked with rushed decision-making, he's allowed others to think for him. He once again ends up extending this offer to Mordecai and to Esther. He looks and he says, here you go, here's my reign. Here's my authority. You can go do whatever you see fit for your people, and it will be as though I did it. And you see, it has to be remembered, Haman, he ended up having an edict, a law, a rule put into place that would allow people to attack the Jewish people. Now, this was irrevocable at this time. No law that the king had established could be taken away or could be backed away from. And so what Mordecai and Esther have to do is write a new law that would allow the Jewish people to defend themselves, to protect themselves. And so you have to remember, this has now been some time that the Jewish people had heard that there was going to be a day where everyone could attack them. They could try to kill them. They could persecute them. And so in this moment, when they end up receiving this edict, this new law, yes, they celebrate. They rejoice. Why? Because they now have a hope. They have hope that they actually could live, because originally it would have been that they just quite literally had to take whatever was coming to them. They just had to receive whatever beatings or attacks would take place. And so in this moment, Esther and Mordecai then, they go and they extend an opportunity of hope to the people. Now, really quick, let's look at this then for us today, because we obviously are not living in this particular moment like they were. But for us, we have to understand something. When we look at the king, King Xerxes, now, he's not a good king. He's not a great guy, but he's ultimately doing things in this moment that are benefiting the people. Now, in our lives, we have to realize and we have to remember, man, we get to walk with Jesus. We walk with God, the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. Now, what do we see that Jesus does for us? Jesus lets us walk in his authority. We get to walk as his representatives. We walk as his ambassadors. What did Mordecai and Esther get to do? They got to be ambassadors on behalf of the king, installing and walking through things as if it was the king who had done it. Now, how much greater is it then that we have a good king, a great king, a God who cares for us, who does not just look and say, go and solve your own problems, but he says, let me walk with you in the midst of all of it. If you look at this moment and you end up being able to recognize and realize, man, God, this was them having hope reinstalled, that there would be another day for them. That's an incredible thing. We have to realize God's done that for us too. And so today I just want to encourage you, just like Esther and Mordecai received the king's signet ring, you have received authority from Jesus that we get to walk in light of. But you guys, tomorrow we get to continue on in this story. We get to see not just how the Jewish people were given hope, but how they ended up walking that out. But today what I want to say then really quick is thanks for jumping on. If you're on YouTube and you enjoyed this, man, make sure to take a moment, subscribe to the channel, leave a like on the video. If you're on Apple and Spotify, 5 stars helps people to know they can trust this content. So make sure to do that real quick if you don't mind. But with that being said, thanks for jumping on today. If you got any questions, comment them down below. We want clarity, not confusion. But I'm so glad you were here. I can't wait to see you tomorrow, because we are taking time to study the Word of God every single day.